Big welcome to our live audience for the Digital Health Investor Talk show. I'm your host, Stephen Wardell. I'm the managing partner of Wardell Advisors, a digital health advisory firm, and the author of The Future of Digital Health. Wardell Advisors is helping digital health companies address issues around growth, fundraising, trade sales, and strategic alternatives, giving you more options in today's challenging environment. You can follow me on X at Stephen Wardell. Our show today is on the topic of key longevity insights you need to know with Dr. Soheil Saadat. Soheil Saadat is the founder and CEO of GenieMD, a telemedicine and digital health company based in the San Francisco Bay Area that focuses on virtual care that promotes vitality and longevity, AI-driven chronic disease management, and healthcare communication technologies. Soheil is launching a longevity product called Elora. This show is being recorded and will be included in my podcast series called the Digital Health Investor Talk Show. Subscribe to our podcast on Apple and Spotify and leave us a review. We have new podcast links for the show, so make sure that you see recent episodes when you subscribe, or you could be subscribing to an old page for the old podcast. This is not investment advice, and we are not investment advisors. Here's the format of today's show. It's 90 minutes long, and Soheil and I will spend the first part discussing the news and the macro picture and some other topics, and then we'll focus on our specific topic of the day. And we'll be taking your questions throughout the show in the LinkedIn chat. So welcome to the show, Soheil.
It's a pleasure to be with you, Steve.
Thank you. And can you introduce yourself to our audience?
Absolutely. I am Soheil Saadat. I'm the founder and CEO of GenieMD. I've been in healthcare for the past roughly 12 years. Prior to GenieMD, I founded 3 other companies. The first company was sold to Hewlett-Packard. Second company was sold to Agilent, and the third was sold to Microsoft. So I'm a serial entrepreneur. I'm an entrepreneur by nature. I'm also an angel investor, a great interest in young people that are interested in starting their own companies. Part of StartX mentor group where I mentor some of the young entrepreneurs to make unicorns. So it's a great pleasure to be with you guys today.
Great, thank you. So now we'll move on to the next part of the show, which is on macro news. This is things like index levels and inflation and interest rates and jobs and employment numbers, and especially how they affect what we call the innovation economy, which is the economy of young companies, usually software companies, and the investors who back them. So I guess the first news is that the NASDAQ is at near record highs at 22.8 thousand and has been steadily climbing up. And this is after a big scare that happened in the Friday-Monday timeframe when Trump seemed to be starting a new level of trade war with China. And although that's still playing out, it's not clear why things have sort of become rosy. Trump downplayed the seriousness of the new trade war, and the market continues to rise. Many people have noted that this rise is primarily the so-called Magnificent Seven or Magnificent 10, which are companies that benefit from AI trends. They might be software companies with an AI element to them, or they might be, real-world incumbents like an Amazon or an NVIDIA, which are not necessarily software companies, but nevertheless they benefit from this AI story. Whereas the remaining 490 companies of the Fortune 500 are not benefiting. Their stocks are not going up in the current economy, and so that's an interesting issue. And then also, I think the market believes we're in a cutting cycle with interest rates, and the next Fed meeting is October 28th to 29th, and there's an expectation of another 25 basis point cut at that meeting, with inflation still being a problem but not out of control. And so from the perspective of young companies, we very much would like to see rates cut, provided it doesn't cause a lot of inflation. Inflation is also really bad because we would like to get back to a point where young growth companies are very attractive compared to, say, bonds or something like that. So Soheil, do you follow the macro news? Any thoughts on these kinds of indicators and what it means for the innovation economy?
I kind of do, and I always get confused as to what is happening. It's just kind of the ups and downs of the day. I mean, you think that the market is kind of making progress, and all of a sudden, over one day and one news, there is a significant drop in the market. Generally, what my concern has been is that whether we are in sort of a bubble, and Interestingly, I guess 2 days ago, there was an article in New York Times talking about an AI bubble. This gentleman by the name of Andrew Sorkins, that I respect because I watch his program on CNBC. He recently just finished writing a book called 1929 that talks about what happened in 1929, October of 1929, where we had that really huge crash of the market. What he's citing is that between 1928 and September of 1929, the stock market grew 90%. And only a month later, it just crashed. And then he's just kind of citing some of the things that happened during the dot-com boom, where companies like kind of pet.com, they just went public for $80 million. I'm not sure if he cites that in his book or some other reference, but pet.com went public for $80 million, and only 9 months later, they went bankrupt. Just a bit of concern, as excited everybody is about AI and the impact on everything that we do. And I personally am a true believer of AI. There appears to be a bubble. For example, OpenAI is going to be investing $1 trillion, $1 trillion, combination of Microsoft, Oracle, others investing 500, another 100 billion from NVIDIA and so forth. And their income this year is going to be 13 billion. So there is a significant disparity between the amount of money that is being pumped into this market versus what is expected out of the market in terms of the return on investment. That what basically defines a bubble. So there is a concern, and that's what Andrew speaks to as to whether this is an incredible, incredible opportunity for growth, or it is yet another bubble that is going to burst.
Yeah, really good point. So for our audience, a way to think about this with publicly traded companies, the Magnificent 10, which includes companies like Netflix and Amazon and Microsoft and Google and others. So their stock prices keep going up. But ultimately, in the future, that has to be supported by higher earnings in the future. And that in turn has to be supported by the idea of new, very profitable products in the future, obviously AI products in the future, providing these earnings. But that's not what we don't have that yet today for all sorts of reasons. We're in a land rush period, and people are trying to grab market share and get usage at any price and cost, and not at high margin prices and costs. And so there's a promise that they will deliver AI products with high earnings in the future, but that hasn't happened yet. And as we look at this, a lot of people are delighted by replacing Google search with an AI product. But if search was free and then later the AI product is $100 a year, how delighted are they going to be with that AI product? They might refuse to pay that, in which case now you don't have a profitable product for the company. And so we're in this intermediate period of time where, and so what's true of these large companies is that their CapEx has gone up. That's true. And what's also true of them is that their margins have probably gone down to a certain extent because they're spending on operating costs to support this. But what's not true is they don't have the revenue yet behind big new products, and they also don't have big margin behind those big products. So there's a promise we'll get that later, but we just don't know. It's the uncertainty, and that's why we could be in a bubble. If they don't deliver on big revenue, high profitable products in the future, it will have been a bubble.
Yeah. It's just the difference between now and the 1990s that there are more zeros in the valuations. I mean, $1 trillion is just a number that we throw around kind of casually, but that's a lot of zeros after the one.
Great. So now moving on to our next section is public policy. So here, I'd love to hear what you're seeing in your part of the healthcare world in public policy over the last several months. The Trump changes. I think in general, right now, we're seeing a government shutdown with layoffs. I heard there were going to be significant HHS layoffs happening right now, and other sort of freezes in government policy happening right now. In the recent past, we've also seen, talking now 3-4 months ago, great concern over layoffs at the FDA, where medtech companies can't spend because they don't have the name of someone at the FDA who's going to be reviewing their product in the future. And so they're holding back on spending on clinical trials or other things like that. And so that's another change. There's also a general, what's being called a Trump pause, which is that there was a lot of chaos and confusion around tariffs around pharma companies, and would pharma companies importing drugs to the US face, or products around drugs face tariffs, etc. And this caused a lot of pause. A budget at a pharma company that wants to buy software tech, which we like that, they push off the decision to buy software tech because they don't know what their own revenues and budget's going to be next year. And so they play it conservative. And that's bad news for the small tech company that's trying to innovate and to use that spend from the pharma budget or whatever. And then, so those are some of the changes we've been seeing. Any thoughts are those affecting you? Any thoughts on what you're seeing?
It has. It has had a profound impact on our business and many of our partners' business because midnight September 30th, turning into October 1st, we could no longer kind of send bills basically to Medicare and Medicare Advantage programs. And basically, we reverted back to pre-pandemic laws where telemedicine had to be done in rural areas and you had to be in the medical facility to do this and so forth. So it's been extremely disruptive, and it's extremely unfortunate that we are in that position. Of course, we are very hopeful that the regulators will come back once the government shutdown is over, hopefully soon, and they're going to reinstate the pandemic era regulation where we could kind of see patients remotely, enroll them into a variety of remote patient monitoring, chronic care management program that has proven to benefit patients significantly. Just as a simple example, last year alone, we saved 3 lives of people that were going to commit suicide. And through the remote patient monitoring and being involved with the care manager that was caring for them and guide them not to kind of do kind of crazy actions, we saved 3 lives. And I mean, that is just a very, very insignificant example, but so many different kind of impacts that we've had on people's lives and others by managing people's chronic conditions, guiding them as to how to better manage their chronic conditions, how we've saved the health system significant amount of money by preventing people from going to the emergency rooms. And if the objective is to save money, there's no program better than kind of monitoring these people with not one, but multiple chronic conditions, where by helping them understand their condition, helping them to take their medication, use devices that remind them to take their medication, because medication adherence is one of the biggest problems we have in managing a person's health. People forget to take their medication. They take 2 medications that are interacting with each other negatively and so forth. So tremendous amount of contribution that we've had, not only us, but many of the other companies in the same space to patient care and keeping them healthier. And that all has stopped as a result of the reverting back the regulation.
Very interesting. So that it sounds like that was a natural expiration of a law that then could have been adjusted by the department, but then it turns out that people in the department are currently furloughed and they're not coming into work, and so they can't readjust the right.
There's been a significant effort of making this permanent as opposed to every 6 months or every budget CR to just kind of struggle and kind of extend this. And hopefully this time or next time, they're going to make this permanent, because there's just so much evidence that remote care and telemedicine is of significant value, not only to the patients, but to reduce the cost of care.
Yeah, thank you. Really interesting. So Steve in our audience has typed a question in the chat. He says, I think energy demands of AI are a big concern. Yeah, I've seen a lot about this. There's multiple Steves in the chat. And we had another question about that from a different Steve as well. But so for Steve Kranak, so thank you for that question. Yeah, so about the people, there's sort of a reckoning, a public policy in energy reckoning going on right now. So it turns out that Google search, which makes an index of the web and allows you to search the index, it's an incredibly efficient use of servers and electricity, and it uses CPUs. Generative AI, large language model generative AI, makes very heavy use of electricity in order to answer questions with with significant, thoughtful answers to questions. So it's the opposite of the old search model for generative AI. People seem to prefer generative AI, and it requires a different kind of server center, which is a GPU server center, which has to be then built out and supplied with electricity. It's much less electricity efficient than the old. We're currently going through that build out, and it's measured in hundreds of billions of dollars or even trillions of dollars. And people are wondering, what's this going to do to the price of electricity? Well, it has to increase the demand and also the price of electricity. And so there's been a public policy response, which is to max out the capacities of existing electric generation plants and allow them to build on-site further power generation nodes on their site, and even to give certain companies like OpenAI and Microsoft and Google rights to build their own power plants, to supply their own power stations. So, and then this then could have follow-on effects. It could lead to higher electrical prices for households and businesses. It could have follow-on effects like higher prices for coal and natural gas, and we may even see nuclear plants as well, although there hasn't been a true new nuclear plant, civilian nuclear plant on U.S. territory in a very long time. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, Soheil, but there's like a crack up. The current grid can't handle what is planned and committed in terms of capital spend and chips bought and sites picked for server farms.
Yeah, clearly that is going to be one of the limiting factors. I mean, it's going to be how much data do we have to kind of design these models and kind of make it kind of answer the right, give you the right answers. At the same time, you need incredible amount of power to power all these servers. But the only thing I say is there is an incredible power source that has been kind of overshadowed as of late, and that is the sun. And there is just so much power that you can get from the sun, from the wind, and from a lot of other areas that right now, during the current regime, we are kind of dimming down. But hopefully, at some point, we can kind of realize how much power we can get from those infinite sources of power.
And we've seen really interesting breakthroughs in cost performance of photovoltaic cells. They keep getting better cost performance for a photovoltaic cell, and also for new technologies of batteries, which keep getting more modern, more efficient, and cheaper. And the combination of that, filling your batteries during the day and then providing your electricity to the people who need it when they need it, is very powerful. And we're seeing that built out primarily in China, and secondarily, there's expansion in the US as well. And then Steve M. in the audience says large CapEx medical device projects are also on a Trump pause. Yeah. So that, I take it, that means the CapEx behind clinical trials or manufacturing of new medical devices. But there's just so much uncertainty in the market that large enterprises like a Boston Scientific or J&J or a Medtronic can just say, they can just pause, say, we'll wait for 3 months, we'll wait for 6 months, and then see if the market is more stable then. I have heard of a Trump pause coming to an end, which is in pharma tech spend for clinical trial tech, which is usually about decentralized clinical trials or patient recruitment in clinical trials. I've heard there's been a lot of green lights on spending on new software tech, often for AI companies with new solutions for clinical trial advancement. So that's an area where there's money to spend on pilots, money to spend on commercial purchases in pharma in the pharma clinical budget. So that's a hot area right now. But I can totally see large CapEx for new medical device projects being on a Trump pause as well. So thanks, Steve M. Let's see. So then moving on to the next part, we just talk about sort of the environment for fundraising, consolidation, and IPOs. So here, if we look at this, some interesting things happening. So there's very much what I'm seeing is there's very much a barbell economy and so we've had the problem of the Trump pause in fundraising for young companies in digital health. But in general, hot new Gen AI companies are getting funded. There's certain areas that are getting funded. New Gen AI companies are getting funded. Programs around GLP-1s are getting funded. The pharma tech sector is pretty hot right now. Those are 3 areas that are seeing funding. But many other parts of digital health are not seeing funding. And so old themes investors liked are not seeing funding. Old tech stacks, companies with old tech stacks that don't have a story about how Gen AI improves their productivity, are seeing trouble raising money. And so we're at a funding level that is much lower than it was 4 years ago during the height of the boom. And it's a barbell in the sense that companies that are in these favored sectors can find a bidding environment and high valuations, and companies that are not in these favored sectors, even though they were in a hot area 4 years ago, are having trouble getting the attention of investors. So that's the early stage fundraising. And then we desperately wanted, if you go back to JP Morgan Healthcare Conference in January in San Francisco, we desperately wanted to see the IPO window open this year, and we thought that it would open this year. And we were right. It opened up in the spring, and we had the IPO of Hinge in May and Omada in June, and also HeartFlow, which is a medtech company in the cardiovascular space. But then we haven't seen a lot since then. And so it's not clear why. There's 100 digital health unicorns that would like to go public, and we haven't seen what. And there's been rumors of the filing of silent filings, etc. And there's lists of companies that would be likely to IPO, like Aledade or Datavant or Transcarent or Verta or Maven or others. But we haven't seen real S1, public S1 filings, and we haven't seen announced intentions to IPO. And so I think there's still a chance we'll see some more before December, but it's been disappointing how few IPOs there have been. The digital health sector used to have a big halo over it. It was this exciting area at the intersection of healthcare and technology. Now it has a kind of an anti-halo or troubled view of investors of it because there haven't been a lot of good exits in the sector in 15 years. And so we need these exits, and we need them to go well. And going well means that they IPO, and then the stock price goes up 15% and stays up. That's a good IPO. So we need more of these to happen. And we only saw these small number, given the 100 unicorns waiting in the wings. We only saw this small number of IPOs. So it's been a disappointment, and we could still see some more before the end of December. So any thoughts on the fundraising environment, Soheil?
Actually, I agree with you. There is just such a megaphone kind of thing about AI that anything else, if you go to an investor and talk about anything that has a significant AI component, they show you the door. But some of these recent successes, for example, the Open Evidence, they just recently raised $210 million on a $3.5 billion valuation. I think it's AI Bridge that raised $300 million on a $5.3 billion valuation. AI Doc raised $150 million. So there's a lot of money that is available. And that's just what I was kind of referring to earlier. It's just the investment into AI is so much that it's just the concern is that the eventual kind of revenue coming out of these companies is not going to be commensurate with the significant investment that is going into this. So we all wish Open Evidence and everybody else great success, but going from zero to just a few months into the company and be worth $3.5 billion at times kind of gives you a bit of concern. And we have seen other things like the Teladoc. They went from 16 billion and acquired this other company in San Francisco. It became 33 billion. And now look at it. I think they're under $2 billion. It's kind of a difficult market to kind of maintain. As you said, you just go public. You want to go public. You want your days trading to kind of bump you up to some 10 to 20%. And then moving forward from that point to kind of maintain that. But that has not proven to be the case.
So then also the M&A environment in digital health. By the way, for our audience, feel free to throw questions about fundraising and consolidation and IPOs and M&A into the chat. So here, digital health has been in an odd situation. So for 15 years, which is for as long as any of us can remember practically, digital health has had under consolidation. So it's had over entry of talent, capital, companies, products, and it's had under shakeout and under consolidation. So consolidation is when one company buys another, and shakeout is when a company winds up exits the industry in one way or another. And I think that was because of the Fed's ZIRP policy. The Fed's zero interest rate policy meant that you had entry into the sector, a lot of entrepreneurs finding easy money, a great environment for starting a company and raising money. And then we also had under shakeout and under consolidation because there's two kinds of young companies. One that has a hit product and is growing rapidly, and those companies often sell out to consolidators at 50 million or 100 million in revenue. But the digital health companies didn't do that. They didn't sell out to consolidators because they were getting a very high valuation from VCs, and they always thought they could just raise more money at a higher valuation and become the new incumbent themselves. And so then there's also companies that have been around for several years and haven't really found product market fit. And those companies were they were candidates for a shakeout, but they stuck around because they were still able to raise money from investors 4 years ago or so in that fundraising environment. So you had under shakeout and under consolidation. And now finally the market environment seems right to have consolidation of who's left. And so there's a lot of predictions we'll see consolidation of who's left. We'll see consolidation in employer health tech with companies like Virgin Pulse and Teladoc and Omada being acquirers and acquiring other companies in the space. We'll see consolidation in provider tech and pharma tech. But I would say that what we've actually seen in the environment is supposedly better now. What we've actually seen has been weak. We have not seen all the consolidation that we'd like to see. I did see a deal where Talkspace acquired Wardell Health. Terms not disclosed, that usually means it's a small deal for Talkspace. But Wardell Health is a social health and peer support platform focused on combating loneliness with trained peers, moderated communities, and group coaching. So this is a very targeted consolidation by Talkspace. We're seeing some of these, but just not as much activity of consolidation as we would have expected. And this is due to a couple of factors. One is that there's not a lot of high margin profitable companies in digital health, and you need those to do the acquisitions. And a second is that the target companies might be holding out for a high price that's not realistic in today's market. And then lastly, the consolidator companies may have trouble raising financing to do an acquisition in this environment. So there's predictions we'll finally see the mother of all consolidations in digital health, and this is the time for it right now. And instead, we're seeing select acquisitions, but not a lot of acquisitions in digital health. So, and then that's too bad because we want, as an innovation community, we want to see investors who need an exit being able to exit. We'd like to see meritorious companies being bought. We'd like to see normal consolidation play out for this industry. And if we don't see that, it'll be another problem for digital health as a sector, not having good exits for investors. Any thoughts on that, Soheil?
I think you covered it really well. So we're just going to leave it at that point.
So now we're moving on to trade journal news, business and trade journal news. And for our audience, feel free to throw any stories in the chat that you want us to comment on. But I'll just mention, I like to cover fundraisers here and what they mean. And so one I'll cover is that New York mental health company Marble Health raised $15 million. It's a virtual mental health platform for students. And the company works with schools and enables collaboration among counselors, parents, and providers. And the round was led by Costa Noah with Town Hall Ventures and Khosla Ventures. And so when I see this, first of all, it's really rare in digital health to see digital health companies working with schools, with middle schools, high schools, universities. That's a channel they historically haven't liked. It's not clear why. They love employers as a channel. They don't like schools. And so I'm glad to see a young company has apparently successfully tackled the issue of working through schools. It also brings up collaboration. There's the student, but then also counselors, parents, and providers. Fantastic. It's so obvious to me that there ought to be that collaboration, and there isn't today for siloed reasons. And so I like the sound of this. And then, so this looks good. This is also mental health and virtual care are still hot themes with investors. And so this is consistent with those themes. And then Costa Noah is not a normal digital health investor. And we see a lot of these deals where normal digital health investors passed on good companies. And it's not clear why that normal prominent digital health investors are passing on good companies. And so the lead investor, Costa Noah, is not a normal digital health investor. So you wonder why wasn't there a highly pedigreed fund doing that? But then also it has Town Hall Ventures and Khosla Ventures participating. Those are top brand name venture funds. Those are outstanding venture funds. And so I guess I would call the syndicate a mainstream syndicate. So the mainstream venture funds in digital health get credit for being the syndicate of this. But I don't know why they have a fund I haven't heard of before that's not a digital health fund as their lead fund. So, and then I'll cover a second one, which is Well Theory, which is a virtual autoimmune care platform, raised $14 million in a Series A, and it'll use the funds to drive commercial growth and broaden its employer and payer programs and accelerate AI development. With General Catalyst led the round with participation from 7wire, Box Group, and Excel. So this is a really interesting area. They say they're selling to employers and payers. That puts this in the same category as Livongo selling diabetes to the employer, and Omada selling diabetes and hypertension to the employer, Virta selling diabetes to the employer. And there's a category that's not well recognized. The biggest category selling to the employer is diabetes and other metabolic, hypertension, and musculoskeletal. And musculoskeletal, that's Hinge, and diabetes and hypertension, that's Omada. But there's one that's not quite as well understood, but's big, and that's autoimmune. And autoimmune is a bunch of different conditions, like arthritis and other autoimmune conditions. And there's modern large molecule on-patent drugs that are extraordinarily expensive for these conditions that are $50,000 a year, $100,000 a year or more. And this is costing employers a great deal. And so this has rapidly risen in employers' understanding to be one of the big categories that they should be spending on a program to help their employees manage this. So this is a company meeting that need of employers. And I'm glad to see, and this is an outstanding syndicate here, General Catalyst, 7wire. You couldn't get more mainstream than that. So it's good to see those. So, and this, I'm seeing more fundraising deals, and that's a good sign that after a long period of pause and inadequate fundraising deals, we're starting to see leading VCs doing normal looking deals again. So Soheil, any thoughts on those two fundraisers and what they mean?
Yeah, the only comment I have is your comment about schools. So we did some work with schools in the state of Michigan where the activity was funded by General Motors and Ford Foundation. And that was very limited investment in a short period of time. So the fact that, I mean, applying telemedicine to schools, it just can't be any better application where a kid is not feeling well. You are in Chicago, parents are hours away in traffic to kind of come and pick up the kid. So wouldn't it be amazing if the kid can walk into a nurse's office, push a button, see a doctor, and decide whether the kid can go back to the class or has to go back home. And unfortunately, there's no funding for these types of activities in schools and school districts. And I think that is the limiting factor, or at least that is my understanding or perception as to why these types of things has not taken off in schools as much.
Yeah, you're right. If you think about, so I know many young employees today, they're 25 years old and they need to see a doctor, and it's completely obvious to them at work that first of all, usually their medical practice has the same hours as their work. And so they're going to be seeing a doctor during work hours. And so then it's totally obvious to them they should do a video call. They walk into a conference room at work, they pull out their phone, they do their visit with their physician unless they have to be in the physician's office. And they expect their care to come from their phone. And that's just normal among young people today. And the idea that they picked a doctor because it was close to their home or something. And the idea that they would have to drive to the doctor, do that commute, and then come back to the office is absurd to them. Why would they ever do that? But then you take a mother and a kid, and the mother's an employee somewhere, and she has to do what exactly? She has to drive first to the school and then take the kid to the physician and then wait in the waiting room and then take the kid back to school or take the rest of the day off, take the kid home. It's even more absurd.
It's absurd.
So then other business news. So the health tracking ring maker Elora announced it had raised $900 million, boosting its valuation to $11 billion. This is, to me, incredible that Elora is now having as much or more success as Fitbit did. And Fitbit was ultimately acquired by Google. There's also Whoop now out there, which is worth following. But the round was led by Fidelity, along with Iconic, Atreides, and Whale Rock. And the company will use the funds to fuel global growth and to speed up AI and product development. So really interesting to see this here. And When Aura came out, I thought that we already had Garmin's, we already had Fitbits, we already had others. What was the benefit of a specifically ring form factor? And at the time, the battery was terrible, and it could never have a battery as big as the battery on a wrist-based activity tracker. And so I didn't see what was special about Aura, but somehow they really made a positive mark, and there's clearly appetite for people for fitness and for what's it called, measured man, a quantified self, and the number of sensors and applications keeps growing. It helps you with sleep now. It helps you with diet, not just step counts. So it's nice to see a thriving market and a strong fundraising environment for Aura. And then lastly, I'll just call out North Carolina-based Alleviate Health, an AI-enabled patient recruitment company for clinical trials, was announced it was launching with a $4.3 million seed round from Andreessen Horowitz. The CEO of Alleviate is Satvik Boonpelli, and the partner at Andreessen Horowitz is Jay Rugani. And the company offers human-in-the-loop AI agents that screen patients for clinical trial participation. So really interesting. I'll just say this is the deal of the moment. This is finding a use of Gen AI to address one of the big enterprise budget problems in healthcare, which is pharma finding and screening and determining clinical trial eligibility to speed up clinical trials. So this is the most typical deal of the time. Everyone is scrambling to figure out how to put together a company to do this sort of thing. Also, Andreessen Horowitz has made a very controversial statement, and their controversial statement is that every single company out there is dead and will be replaced by a native Gen AI company that will do what it is doing. And so this is targeting, there's a very large pharma services industry and CRO industry out there. And so this is Andreessen Horowitz putting its money where its mouth is and saying that those are ultimately going to be replaced by companies that are born today, that are Gen AI native, that take advantage. Gen AI does two things. One is it lets you build your software stack faster. And the other is that it may give you special features and functionality that the prior generation of tech can't give you. And so leveraging those two capabilities to rapidly build a new company and to take on the last generation of vendors and even the incumbents. So this is kind of this deal captures the zeitgeist of the moment. So Soheil, anything on Aura and on Alleviate?
So regarding Aura, I think what made them successful, in my opinion, beyond the form factor and how easy it is to carry it, it's not a watch, it's not heavy like Apple Watch. At times, it's sort of looks good on your fingers and so forth. But I think what won the game the day for them was their sleep management and kind of giving you information as to how well you slept, how many kind of REM slept, how many hours of REM slept, I think that was the most significant value that you could get out of something that's simple to wear. And then I think they deserve the valuation that they have.
Interesting. And also I'll add that not everybody wants to wear a digital watch. A lot of people would like to wear a stylish analog watch. And
exactly.
So if you still want to wear a Fitbit and a watch, then you wind up having a watch on one wrist and a Fitbit activity tracker on the other, and it seems like too much. And so you can switch to a ring instead.
I agree.
Well, good. Well, so next is reports. So now we're switching to a new section, which is reports that have come out about our sector in the last couple of weeks. For our audience, feel free to throw any questions about reports or reports you've heard of into the chat. Soheil, are there any reports that have come out recently with findings that you found interesting that you want to share with the audience?
I did see a report out of Rock Health that basically says there's more investment this year compared to last year. The Q3 of 2025 saw roughly $2.5 billion raised across roughly 100 plus companies. And year to date, it's been roughly 10 billion across 350 plus companies. So that's pretty encouraging in terms of number of companies that got funded. And that kind of caught my attention.
That's interesting. If you cycle back to January, there was some speculation that went like this. It was that the market conditions changed so much that investors had raised big funds and they still had to put the money to work, but they were slow to put the money to work. And so they would have to put it to work quickly or return it to LPs. but they're definitely never, ever going to return it to, to LPs, because then they would have to stop charging fees on it if they did that. So they have to put it to work. And so the speculation was that instead of making 10 risky early stage investments, it was going to be unhappy with all the investment themes it had in front of it. And instead of making 10 early stage investments, it was going to make 2 large later stage safer investments, maybe a company that was at break even or something like that. Entrepreneurs were very disappointed by this speculation that funds that had raised a $300 million fund or a $500 million fund were going to sort of play it safe and go later stage and invest in more proven companies with the dollars, because the venture funds were unhappy with the math of what returns looked like, and with the themes that they had available to them of young risky companies. But I think what's been happening instead is that the trend of generative AI investing has been bigger and more durable than anybody thought instead. And so now you'll have a fund and it'll throw 100 million into a Gen AI deal in the hospital administrative sector, for example. And that would explain why we're seeing investment. So instead of putting it into small early stage Series A startups or into safe Series C rounds in more mature companies, they're putting it into huge deals in still early stage Gen AI companies in healthcare. And that's causing these investors to spend their dry powder. So, but
I think just one thought about all of this advancement in AI is obviously we're going to replace a lot of kind of low end jobs, and so what are these people going to do? And it's just in this economy. I mean, there was a time where I would stand in a line and write a check and get $20 from the teller after she went back and put a stamp on the check and came back and gave me $20. All of those disappeared when we had these ATMs. But those people could kind of get other jobs because it wasn't that big of a jump to go from a teller to some other job. But nowadays, if your job is obsoleted because of some computer or chatbot that is just going to completely obsolete you, and the number of jobs that are obsoleted is significant, I kind of wonder what the impact of that is going to be on the economy.
Yeah, it's a really good point. And another similar to that, I heard an interesting analogy being made, which was that the last big tech trend was cloud. And with cloud, and taking the case of CRM systems powered by cloud, used to have salespeople who were natural born salespeople with natural skills, and they would rapidly get paid more than less good salespeople. And they just had natural gifts, like they would always remember a secretary's name, or they would always anticipate what a customer wanted, or they would always follow up to a customer communication with the right kind of message afterward. And what CRM did was it pulled up the worst salespeople. It took low quality salespeople and made them medium quality. It took medium quality and made them high quality, because it told them who the secretary's name was, and it told them what's the next best action you should take. It meant that those companies didn't have to hire rare, high quality salespeople and pay them a lot. They could hire a mid quality salesperson and pay them less, and give them tools that made them better and more competitive. That was cloud. But the effect of Gen AI is the opposite of this. The effect of Gen AI is that if you're in a law firm, there's only a certain number of people who have successfully argued cases in front of judges, and who are the partners of the firm, and who know exactly the kind of argument that needs to be made, and have in their heads all the precedent cases, and how judges weigh those cases, and how they can structure arguments. Those are the partners of the firm. And you have 7 partners at a law firm supported by 14 principals at a law firm, supported by 20 analysts at a law firm. Well, now those partners don't need the mid and junior level people anymore. Now they know how to tell Gen AI to write the legal case, and they know how to read the legal case after it's written to make sure it's exactly what they think it is and needs to win. So they don't need support anymore. And so instead of making those mid-level and junior level lawyers, they may be good, they may be bad, but they're not going to get a chance now to climb.
And write it better. I mean, the Gen AI is going to write it better than those junior people. That's the kind of ironic thing about all of this.
Yeah, interesting. Well, so now we're going to skip some sections in our show and just go to a fun part of the show, which is, what is a technology that you've used that has improved your life? And so I'll throw in here that I am increasingly talking verbally to ChatGPT. I'm always surprised. It really understands me. It gives thoughtful answers. It gives short answers. I think its answers are pretty high quality. And I was surprised that Sam Altman said that that is the version of ChatGPT that he thinks will be the most powerful and important in the future. So you've got Google Notebook, which is giving you, a 1,000-page context window. That's the opposite. That's text, putting in 1,000 pages of text. But the ChatGPT voice is talking to it, and so you could imagine you've got a contract, you've got an 8-page vendor contract you have to sign in 2 hours in front of you, and you're reading it, and you can't get your lawyer. Your lawyer has other commitments, and so you're talking to ChatGPT, and you're saying, "What about this phrase? Does this give me adequate protection or something?" And then ChatGPT possibly giving you good legal advice back and being your trusted advisor in that case. So I'm surprised, and there's interesting use cases for it, which are a little bit eccentric, like talking to ChatGPT when you're walking down the street or in your car or something, so that you have your hands free or whatever. So anyway, that's my vote for an interesting use of technology. Soheil, any thoughts as to technology that you've used that has improved your life?
I also use a voice into ChatGPT, and at times it is so friendly and so polite that at the end you would like to say thank you or I appreciate it to the computer, which is kind of ironic. A friend of mine said that she's been using Meta glasses, and she's excited about it. They can take photos and videos, and she travels internationally, looks at some French menus, and you can just kind of look at it, and it's all in English through your glasses. So I've been promised that for my next birthday, I'm going to get one of those. So I'm looking forward to that technology.
Yeah, that's great. And I've used, I don't know if people know this, but there are apps for iOS and Android on your phone right now where you can do the go to the Italian restaurant with menus only in Italian. Or I did this in Greece, and you are holding your phone camera down over this menu, and it replaces the Greek text with English text, and it does it in the same font as, so the background is
Within the
slight.
same frame. Within the same frame. Like if you're looking at a street sign, it changes that and is still within the street sign, but as though it is in English as opposed to French.
Yeah. So amazing. That's available to us now on our phones, and you can also get it in, and even more useful would be to have it in your glasses as well. So I'm very impressed with that. So then the next is upcoming conferences. So and we have Steve K has asked another question. He said, to your point about not needing mid-level legal person, are we at risk of losing the ability to get someone to an advanced level? Yes, that is very much the concern. I've also heard this I've heard people who work for Philips saying the same thing, which is that young people are working from home often, and that means that they never get to meet, if you're in product, you never get to meet marketing, you never get to meet biz dev, you don't get to have important conversations that tell you industry scuttlebutt or help you advance your career. That's working at home. But then they're not needed by mid to senior level people who just say, I could give this to a junior person, or I could get the answer faster using Gen AI. And so they're finding that they're at risk of losing. So we're at risk of losing, or it's most painfully felt by the young people themselves who don't get the opportunity and have to figure out how to do it from scratch. That they're not given an escalator career path. They have to figure out how to do everything in a senior role on their own. That's one problem. And then also, doctors have pointed out a lot that when you get tools to help you be a doctor, they can be very helpful, but they also mean that you're not doing it in your head anymore. And so if every tool is calculating the amount of medication you need every step of the way for a patient, you used to actually literally do that yourself on paper. What's the patient's weight? How much medication per kilogram of the patient or whatever. And now it's done for you. And this is causing the doctors to get less good at these things because it's done for them. So it can make the senior person less good at things, and it can also remove the career track of the junior people below them. So, Soheil, any thoughts on that?
No, I think you captured it.
So then upcoming conferences. So everyone is talking about the health conference. And so digital health has had some air deflated out of the bag since the last health conference and the one before that. And so this is a conference known for being slightly expensive and glamorous. I like it a lot. I think the programming is usually very good at this, but everyone's wondering if there's going to be significantly less attendance and less budgets spent on the health conference this year, which I think is likely. But at the health conference, for me, this is heavily supported by VC investors. And so I would say this is the last opportunity to do so, but I would say write to VCs and say, let's meet, to VCs you know and have met, and to VCs you don't know and haven't met. They're often in meeting mode at this event. Their schedules might be full now, but you might get meetings. So that's the health conference. And then JP Morgan, I think that'll be big again this year, although it's declining slightly in relevance in digital health because the audience is being stolen away by the health conference, and other conferences are successfully stealing some of the digital health software audience away from JP Morgan. But for that, it's a conference all about meetings and meetings with VCs. And so for JP Morgan, I would send out invitations typically before Thanksgiving, and try to do 6 meetings a day in JP Morgan and send out enough emails before Thanksgiving that you can fill up about 6 meetings a day. So that's my upcoming conferences. Soheil, are there any that you're going to or that you recommend for our audience?
Yeah, so last year we attended what was known as Arab Health Conference in Dubai, and they renamed it to WHX this year in Dubai. Some 60,000 people showed up last year. So many different companies, from AI-based companies to pharma companies, pharmacy companies. So if you're thinking of expanding globally, everybody around the world will attend that conference. It's going to be a 16-hour flight to Dubai, but it might be worth it if you're expanding globally. The other thing is, of course, the HIMSS, which is a significant company, has always been a significant conference, is coming up in March.
So HIMSS in March, and HIMSS is a true trade show, so you can expect to be able to talk to customers and prospective customers there who buy your software product, whereas health is not actually a trade show. It's an innovation conference and an investor conference, and it's trying to be a trade show, but it has not successfully become a trade show yet. So then personal notices. I'll just mention that my next Boston Health Innovation Night is tomorrow, Thursday, October 16th. We have a VC investor, F Prime's Carl Byers, is coming to talk about the 4 agents for your health. And I'm not sure what that sound is. So that's coming up this Thursday, October 16th. You can get tickets at stephenwardell.eventbrite.com. Soheil, any personal notices from you?
No, I think this year we're just gonna not attending. I mean, you said that health might not be as attended, and I think it's going to be some $3,500 less income to them because I'm not going. But yeah, we're laying low and kind of looking forward to 2026.
That's great. So now we're shifting to the second part of our show, which is key longevity insights you need to know. So longevity care is making advancements and growing more popular among consumers, but longevity isn't just about adding years to your life. It's about adding life to those years. What steps can you take today to extend your health span and enhance your quality of life? So I am surprised, Soheil, by just how topical longevity is. It's had kind of a 3-year run here of consumers getting more and more interested in longevity. There's also growing numbers of breakthroughs. It can be in biometrics or in screening tests or in ways to personalize a program for longevity, understanding longevity better. Really amazing, the developments. And this has contributed to the public becoming more and more interested in this topic. So really glad to have you on board. I know you are launching a product in longevity, and you've put together a framework for how to think about longevity. So really excited to chat with you about this. And I guess I would kick off just by saying a very basic question. What are the big things that are causes of morbidity and mortality for Americans?
Yeah, so the good news is that, as you said, science has advanced significantly, even over the past, 5 years to 10 years. There's just a lot of additional things that you have at your disposal to know more about the inside of your body, how your body is functioning, what are the concerns and issues that you may be. The other thing about longevity, as we kind of get into it, is the existing clinicians, the doctors, the NPs, and so forth. they are really not trained on longevity. They are trained for you to walk in and say, I don't know, have a sinus infection, and they will immediately fix your problem, prescribing you antibiotics. But they are not really trained to kind of carry a conversation with you about longevity. It's not on their radar. And more importantly, it's not reimbursed. There's no CPT code that I know that says, okay, I talked to this guy about living another 10 years. So that is one of the initial kind of topics to discuss. But the existing system is really not set up to deal with longevity. So, but longevity is basically, it's not just me living longer, it is me living healthy and longer, not be a burden on my family, be independent, and not have wires hanging from me in an ICU, and the heart is still beating, and I say I can live another 5 years. It is that I am an active person, I'm enjoying life, and so forth. For that to happen, if you are 30 years old, if you're 25 years old, there are things that you need to be thinking about now if you want to live to be 90 or 95 or 100. And so that's what the longevity programs are all about. And I can kind of expand into prevention and detection of some of the major issues and so forth as you permit me. So I hand it back to you so you can kind of move us forward.
Yeah, thank you. So why don't we jump into that? You talked about prevention and detection. So what should people in our audience be thinking about in terms of, so imagine someone's 30 and they're getting on this train relatively early in life. What are some things they should be thinking about in terms of prevention and detection?
Yeah, so the first thing to do is to make sure that the individual is not facing some serious health issue. And if you look at the top two conditions that cause death in the United States, number one is heart and vascular disease, and the other is cancer. And if we just kind of go to the cancer, which is the second cause, there are significant advances in technology. It's what I call liquid biopsy, whereby just a simple blood test and genome sequencing, a sequencing technology, they can detect insignificant amounts of cancerous cells that detach from the cancer tumor and start floating around the bloodstream. And in doing so, is a successful company in San Diego that was acquired for $8 billion by another company. They detect up to 50 different types of cancer, some of them 2 years in advance of it really becoming something. And so that is very significant because anyone that has had a family member or themselves have been exposed to unfortunate cancer, you know that early detection is the key to survival. So that's one area that is of significant interest in terms of advancement in technologies. And of course, you get these signals from this blood test that says you might have cancer of pancreas, and there are signals that are indicating that. And then you can take that signal and go to your doctor and kind of dig further into exactly what is happening. The other thing about kind of early detection is a full body MRI. And full body MRI is not going to cost you too much. It can start at $450 and can go a little further up. And a friend of mine did this full body MRI, and they detected a significantly large tumor in his abdomen. Unfortunately, that was benign, and it was very rare that type of a growth be benign. But fortunately, it was for him. But the fact is that if there was cancerous, it was growing for a good number of years, and he didn't know. There were no symptoms. And so by some of these technologies, advanced technologies, you can detect these types of issues in the body well before it becomes a serious problem. And of course, the other aspect of it that is kind of secondary to those serious issues is some of the biomarkers in your system. For example, many people don't know what their cholesterol level is. Many people don't know what their A1C is. And by not knowing, they cannot put corrective action in place to prevent something kind of more serious happening. If I have a high LDL and my arteries are getting clogged up and I don't know, at some point, that is going to lead to heart disease, going to lead to heart attack, and that is way too late. So early detection through these technologies is where it's at. And then you can also use kind of more advanced technologies, such as just the a sequencing, genome sequencing. And there are interesting opportunities there to even detect things that are not showing any signs today. For example, there is a gene, and I forget not the name of the gene, forgive me, but it is tied to Alzheimer's. So if you can, with a simple test, detect that that gene exists and is behaving a little different than it should, then you can kind of put preventive things. Now, Alzheimer's is a very complex disease. We don't have a particular cure for it and so forth. But there are things that you can do to basically push the onset of Alzheimer's further out into the future. Say exercise, don't smoke, and drinking, etc. And those are all kind of common sense things to do. But there are things that you can do. But the other is, for example, there are especially kids that have this disease condition where they have an extremely high LDL, where it's clogging their arteries from very early age. And of course, clogged arteries, there's just no technology that can reverse that. So by virtue of kind of getting into using these technologies and detecting these types of things is going to help you kind of live longer and healthier life. And the last part is, of course, obesity. And I know many people that have struggled with being overweight. And even at times myself, I want to lose 5 pounds. I know how difficult it is to do that. But there has been, again, advances in technology where now we have these GLP-1 drugs that showed up it's been like a few years. And that has had such a profound impact on people losing weight, being in a better shape, reducing their A1C, kind of getting off of falling into the diabetes. So significant advances in the technologies that has come about, and we need to take advantage. And I later during our chat here, I want to talk about some futures where I don't know if any of you heard this piece of news where President Xi of China and President Putin were chatting, and it was an open mic. And I think one of them was telling the other one that there are ways that you can live to be 150 years old. And we can talk about it, technologies that have been being developed here in this country.
You know, I remember when I was young, there were many times when I was just hungry, and it wasn't an option in my mom's home to just go to the fridge and take some of her food and eat it. Or I was at school and I was a little bit hungry. I was not malnourished in any sense, but I was at school. I was hungry. You can't eat until lunchtime, and then after lunch, you're not going to eat again until dinner time. And as I grew older and as I, entered the workforce, etc., society changed, and all of a sudden I was surrounded by all the food I could possibly ever want, and caloric drinks and all this stuff, always within arm's reach of desire. There was always a vending machine selling me candy or soda, just a short distance away from me. So society changed in that way. And sure enough, obesity crept up in society. And now these GLP-1 drugs are so interesting because they make you not feel hungry and not want the food that is so natural to want. So when I was young, it was that the food wasn't there. There wasn't extra food around me. There was no vending machine at my school, and there was no food between meals. But today we can finally get back to that reality because people aren't going to be yearning for the sugary drink. They're not going to be yearning for the Snickers between.
Yeah. But ultimately, these drugs, the GLP-1s or others, these are kind of short-term things that you gotta take to help you kind of lose the weight. But ultimately, the most significant thing is to train your brain and have a different relationship with food than, well, I'm just going to go to McDonald's and what is the largest fries that I can order, until such time that you manage to train your brain and have a different relationship with food, that you get off of GLP-1 drugs and soon after you're going to gain the weight back.
Some tips I've heard, and all of these they sound simple, but they're all hard. Changing your relationship with food is really, really hard. But one is, don't eat unless you're hungry. So lunchtime arrives. It's time for lunch, right? Wrong. If you're not hungry, skip lunch. And then another one is, when you are eating, don't eat until you're full. Eat until you're only half full or only 3/4 full, and then stop eating. And don't eat until your plate's empty. I was raised to eat all of my food because I was lucky to have food, but that's not the case today. And so don't eat everything's on your plate. Choose to eat until you're three-quarters full, but not entirely full. And then lastly, if you have a hunger pang between meals, have a glass of water or have a glass of something with 0 calories in it or something like that. And then see if you're still hungry after that, because your body might be tricked to not to the feeling, the hunger pang passes. Like you had a glass of water and the hunger pang passes. I don't know if you have any, but all of those are hard.
Yeah. No, I have a friend that if you eat one grape in front of him and you reach for another one, he's going to say, "You think that this second one is going to taste different? It's going to be the same." So it's again, it's the discipline, and it is not easy. It is not easy to lose weight, but the benefits of losing weight, being in good shape, and not only you kind of live a healthy life now, but it also prolongs your life because you're not going to be facing diabetes and some of the other problems that you may have.
So I have friends who say things like, isn't aging mostly genetic? If you look at someone who's 70 and they look old, that's genetic. If they're 70 and they look young, that's also genetic. If you get cancer, that's genetic. Is this stuff genetic, or can you actually affect it?
Actually, they say that the genetics plays a 20 or 25% role in your longevity. The rest of it is lifestyle, how you treat your body. And the body is no different than it's a machine. If you smoke and you clog your arteries or damage your heart, or you drink too much, of course, you can't expect. It's just like driving your car recklessly and hitting it all over the place. Of course, genetic has something to do with it. I'm not a clinician, so I can't, or genetic expert, so I can't really tell you. But what I have read is something like 20-25%. My father lived to be 98, so hopefully I live kind of a little longer than I currently am. But you never know. But even if you have good genetics in your parents, who knows if you're going to inherit that? There's so many different factors, whether your mother had some kind of disease that is not going to be transferred to you. So it comes down to how well you take care of the precious body and how you treat it. And it is not just kind of a one night or 1 week or 1 month. It is years that you got to take care of it and make sure that you exercise, you have healthy diet, you don't abuse your body by things that are obvious that is bad, like smoking, excess drinking. And so those things kind of inevitably will kind of prolong your life, add to your health span. But it's just an element of genetic. I mean, there are people that have genes that women that they develop breast cancer or ovarian cancer. And we've had kind of movie stars that kind of go through surgeries to remove those organs to prevent that from happening. But it's only 20-25%.
So I think in our audience, when people hear about longevity, they're thinking about perhaps listening to one of the top podcasts about longevity. They're thinking about diet and exercise, but they're not thinking about having a conversation with their primary care physician about longevity. And they're not thinking about elective tests for longevity. And they're not thinking about their doctor doing any kind of longevity intervention or procedure on them. But this is possible. There's something called longevity medicine, which are the contributions that physicians can make using proven products in longevity. So can you tell us about? And there's actually longevity medicine clinics, and these are usually in places like Manhattan, Palm Beach, and Los Angeles. But can you tell us about the rise of longevity medicine?
Yeah. So again, as I kind of alluded to the beginning, is these doctors are not particularly trained, and there is no reimbursement. So my primary care doctor is spending another 15 minutes and lecturing me about what I have to do to live longer is not particularly something he wants to do because he doesn't get reimbursed. But there are a number of medications, such as metmorphin plus, that is characterized to be fountain of youth, off label, that you can prescribe, and they are proven to one way or another extend life. But these are not FDA approved that, okay, you take this medication and you take it every day for 6 months, it's going to add another 3 months to your life. These are off label application of these medications that is proven to be effective in kind of prolonging life, primarily by kind of cutting down, perhaps in the case of metmorphin, kind of cutting down the sugar in your blood and some of the other things that it would do. But there are a whole bunch of compound medications that are out there that, of course, I'm not a clinician, so I can't speak to the efficacy and the value of those, but significant number of those that are out there, and whether they're super effective or not is not something I can judge.
So, and I think when people think of longevity, they're often thinking of things that they can do, perhaps with the help of activity tracker or with the help of an AI coach, or tracking their numbers, their stats, that sort of thing. What are the opportunities use technology to manage your longevity? We've seen very successfully people using technology and AI coaches to manage their diabetes. Most people would find it quite challenging and hard to tightly manage their own diabetes without help from figuring out a system and support and using that system. And longevity sounds even more complicated than diabetes to manage. And so what are some products or some kinds of support we could get from technology in having a longevity plan?
One of the first things that the technology is going to help an individual is to give you a realistic view of what is happening inside your body, whether your biomarkers are out of whack, whether there's cancer growing, whether you have a tumor growing, and so forth. So that is not possible without kind of advanced technology, kind of looking into somebody's body without opening them up. So that's one aspect of this. But once you know that there is a concern, then the remedies are medication. Medication could be diet and exercise, could be motivational things. All of those things kind of come into play. And there are services that are coming up where you have a longevity coach that the objective is not particularly manage your chronic disease. It is to prevent you from having a chronic disease, to help you live longer and healthier, as opposed to some of the existing paradigms. And we are one of the guilty parties of kind of serving that market of somebody comes to us and they have 2, 3, 4 chronic conditions and they take 8 medications. Now we're trying to manage them, where it is really trying to kind of get in front of this person to be in that state in ages, early ages, in 50s and in 60s. And I think that is where longevity comes into play. It is too late if you're 75 and you have heart disease. If your arteries are clogged at age 75, there is nothing that you can do today in terms of there's no kind of chisel, the little kind of robots that you can send in your arteries with chisel and kind of get it all cleaned up. It is too late. So it is just prevention. It is just being in front of it, not only on kind of obvious things of cancer and tumors and so forth and so on, but to also deal with some of the biomarkers that by dealing with them, but through diet, exercise, medication, etc., will prolong your life and health span.
And so thinking of some of these that perhaps our audience might be able to do when it comes to technology and yourself. So the most obvious would be to have an activity tracker and to make a target of 10,000 steps a day. And the nice thing about having an activity tracker is that it can remind you, say, after dinner, that you still have 2,000 steps to go. And if the weather's nice outside, you can go for a walk. And if the weather's terrible outside, you can have like a step machine, which doesn't cost that much, $200 on Amazon. And then in a small space in your home, you can get the remaining 2,000 steps in. And it's a very helpful to remind you of that. But then you take it to the next level, and it would be have a fitness buddy. And with the fitness buddy, now you're sharing your step count. And so if you didn't get to 10,000 and your buddy did get to 10,000, then your buddy wins for the day. And so that this can get your competitive juices flowing, and it can give you a reason, if you're not feeling like it, to get out and do things. Another very basic thing would be that we all have the power to do the following. We have the power that for many phone calls we take, we're in a business environment, you're sitting at your desk taking a phone call, but you could take it on your cell phone and then you could walk during this. if you're the boss, you can make your meeting a walking meeting. This used to be parodied. The governor of California, Arnold Schwarzenegger, back in the day, started doing walking meetings. Everybody thought it was a big joke at the time, but that's become more common. You can take your meeting walking when you don't anticipate that you need to take notes or something, and then now you've gotten in a 30-minute or longer walk during the day. And another one I've seen is that Facebook has a fitness tracker. It has a different brand name than Facebook, but it does body photos. And so the idea is when you get dressed for the gym, dress in tight clothes. Gym clothes are tight anyway. And then you could take a photo of yourself, and then it puts it in there next to the other photos of you. And maybe it's roughly the same photo each day. And then if you have a little excess belly fat, you get to watch as it goes down over time, because you're taking pictures of yourself and it's automatically logging them and showing you your progress over time and telling you you're doing a good job. So all of these are examples. And then finally, I'd also would say sleep tracking can tell you really interesting things. If you have an activity tracker for step count, it probably also gives you sleep tracking. It can tell you things like you slept 8.5 hours, but your quality sleep was only 2 hours. Well, that would be, and so now you know what the problem is that you're in bed a long time, but you're not getting quality sleep. Or it can say that you consistently wake up at 2 a.m. and then you don't fall asleep for a long time. And that can be confusing to remember that and put that in perspective if you don't have a tool that's measuring it, telling you the results afterward. And that's a very different sleep problem. And you can also get help for these sleep problems if you know what they are. So those are examples of using technology. Do you have any favorite examples of using technology to sort of get this longevity lifestyle?
I was just kind of thinking of, I think it was Jean Calment, the French lady that lived to be 122 years old and kind of passed away not too long ago. And I think her claim to living significantly longer than expected, I think, had to do with her diet. And that's just one area that people kind of overlook. It's just the diet. In addition to exercise, has a significant, profound impact on your health and your longevity. So there are areas in the world that people are known to live longer. And if you look at their diet, it's just all plant-based, away from kind of all this greasy kind of burgers and so forth. And that, in my opinion, perhaps has equal impact on your longevity than kind of exercise and so forth.
Yeah, really interesting. And so we're coming to about the end of the show, and I have a question here from Steve M in the comments, and he just wants the audience to know about something called the X Prize for Healthspan. So this is really interesting. This is Peter Diamandis and the team who did the X Prize for spaceflight. Everybody remembers that X Prize. And this one's for healthspan, which is the term for increasing the length of the healthy periods. I think that there's a definition of healthspan, which is that the average American gets their first major chronic disease in their early 50s, and then lifespan lasts until your 70s. And so that gap, when you are managing a major chronic disease that's hurting the quality of your life before you ultimately die of old age, that's the health span gap. And we want to increase health span so that you have more good years in there. And so this is a prize of $101 million. That's amazing to have young companies try to meet goals of sort of cost effectively boosting the health span of the world's population. So really interesting, xprize.org. And Steve M writes that I happen to be fascinated by the research around a protein called klotho. So that's interesting. I'll look up this protein called klotho. Thanks, Steve. And then, Soheil, I have a funny story for you. So you mentioned like the blue zones, which is like the west coast of Costa Rica and Sardinia and Okinawa. And so I happened earlier in my career, I did a project with a company that had the rights to the IP around the blue zones, which is great. Dan Buettner's book, The Blue Zones. I was working with that company, and I had just moved into a city apartment. And in this apartment, they were bragging about all the conveniences in the apartment. They said, just leave your dry cleaning at the front desk. We'll take care of everything else. I was like, great, that sounds fantastic. And they were saying, you can have anything delivered at any time. Amazon packages, food, and our doorman will take care of it. Don't worry about anything at all. Just have stuff delivered. I was like, great. That's fantastic. That's so convenient. And I also made sure I got an Amazon Prime subscription so that I wouldn't be walking to the bookstore. I would get books delivered to my home or whatever. So then for professional reasons, I have to read Dan Buettner's book, The Blue Zones, and I opened it up and it says, among other things, deconvenience your life. It says, if your mailbox is on your front door, take it off your front door and put it on a post 50 yards away from your front door. And if you don't have a dog, get a dog you have to walk every day, so that every day you're going to have to get. Don't drive to the supermarket and fill up your car with a week's worth of food. Instead, walk to the local market, get 2 days worth of food and bring it back. And I said, oh, crap, I just spent all this time and money and effort, and I was delighted at conveniencing my life. And then it turns out that for my health, I need to deconvenience my life.
It's like it's like people that go to gym and they keep driving around finding the parking space that is closest to the door as opposed to parkway. Steve, I just wanted to mention one thing before we end this call, and that is there is significant research that has been going on for a number of years. And there is a doctor by the name of Dr. Anthony Atala of Wake Forest University, and he has been working on regenerative medicine. And I highly recommend you watch a very short 13-minute, 60-minute interview with him as to how he's growing organs and spiking them with your genome. It becomes a perfect match, and then they can transplant that into your body. And of course, speaking of longevity, I think I would remiss if I didn't mention that, because I see body as a car, and your tires kind of wear, and you go to old tires and you get new tires. At some point, you're going to be in that state where kidneys are not functioning well. In 3 weeks' time, you get new kidneys and they put them in there and you have another 10 years. So look it up.
Can you say the doctor's name and also the program's name?
It's Anthony Atala, Atala, and he is a physician at Wake Forest University. And he was interviewed by 60 Minutes good number of years ago. Fascinating technology to watch.
So we used to kind of understand death as that, if you weren't killed in a car accident, then you would live until you had a critical organ that failed, and then you would die of critical organ failure. And as medicine has just gotten better and better to the point where if it's your kidney that fails, there's some alternative. It may not be a great alternative. You may want a natural kidney that your body doesn't reject, and you may have to have something else instead. But the options keep getting better and more reliable, so that that if your liver fails at a certain age, you'll be able to get something better, and so that keeps improving. And as a result, we no longer die when our first critical organ fails. So really interesting. And any other final remark for our audience before we sign off?
Yeah, the only other thing I wanted to say is that, of course, we are kind of working hard all around to kind of extend health span. But there was a gentleman that used to come to these conferences, health conferences. He would start by asking the audience, if you had a choice of living forever, 120 years, 100 years, and 80 years, what would be your choice? And so he would start with, who wants to live forever? And very few people will raise their hand. And who wants to live 120? So ultimately, the magical number was around 90. That I like to live to be 90, and I think I've lived a good life. As long as I'm healthy to 90, then let's call it the day and let's move on. So yes, we want to extend life to be 150, but like any other product, I don't know how many people are going to come and buy it. So we'll just leave it with that.
That's great. Thank you. Well, so you've been listening to the Digital Health Investor Talk show with host Stephen Wardell, and our thanks to our guest, Soheil Saadat, the founder and CEO of GenieMD, a telemedicine and digital health company that focuses on virtual care that promotes vitality and longevity, AI-driven chronic disease management, and healthcare communications technologies. And Soheil is launching a longevity product called Elora. So thank you very much, Soheil, and we'll sign off. Thank you.
Thank you. It was great fun.